The Crimson Songs of Velmor. Part 1. The Last Singer. The rain had been falling for 3 weeks without pause. Not the ordinary autumn rain that washed the cobblestones of the old city and filled the cisterns. This rain was thick as blood, sticky as resin, and it stank like open graves. People said it was because of the war. Others whispered about old gods waking beneath the earth. I knew it was because of the song. My name is Corvath, though that name means little now. I was once a singer of the Crimson Choir, the last one, as it turned out. Now I'm just a man with a throat full of scars and a memory full of screams. I sat in the corner of the Extinguished Candle Tavern, looking through the barred window at the streets of Velmor. The city was dying slowly, like an old man infected with the Red Plague. Houses stood empty, and their inhabitants, well, some of them still walked the streets, but they weren't human anymore. Not in the full sense of the word. Another beer, traveler? The tavern keeper was old Mirga, a woman with a face plowed with furrows like a field after war. One of the few who still remembered the old days. No, I answered, not taking my eyes off the window. Tell me instead, has anyone tried to go down to the Black Crypts yet? Mirga froze, holding a dirty mug in her hand. Her fingers clenched on the clay so hard that her knuckles went white. No one in their right mind goes down to the crypts, not since the time. She broke off, but I knew what she wanted to say. Not since the massacre. Not since the choir sang its last song. I'm going down there, I said quietly. Mirga set the mug on the counter with a dull thud. I want to find silence. The word sounded strange in the tavern's din. Silence. Something that hadn't existed in Velmor for weeks. Not since the songs began. At first, you heard them only at night, thin, almost imperceptible notes coming from beneath the city. Then they became louder, clearer. And when the moon was new, they sang so loudly that blood flowed from the ears of those who listened too long. The songs changed people. Not immediately, not spectacularly. It was subtle, like rust eating iron. First, the eyes changed. They became darker, more shiny. Then more teeth appeared, and fingers. And at the end, they stopped being human. Mirga looked at me for a long time, her tired eyes searching for something in my face. Maybe courage. Maybe stupidity. Maybe the difference between them was negligible. All right, she finally said, but if you go down to the crypts, take this. She reached under the counter and pulled out something wrapped in dirty cloth. I unwrapped the material and saw a dagger, not an ordinary one, but forged from black glass, with a handle braided with hair that still seemed alive, moving despite the lack of wind. "This belonged to my father," Mirga explained. "He was one of the night watchers, before they killed them all. He said this blade could cut through things that normal metal wouldn't touch." I took the dagger. It was cold, almost icy, and pulsed in my hand like a second heart. "Thank you," I said. Mirga just nodded and turned to attend to other guests. I knew she wouldn't say more. In Velmor, people had learned to save their words. Words had power, and power attracted attention from things whose attention you didn't want. The entrance to the Black Crypts was located in the oldest part of the city, in the district called the Empty Quarter. It once pulsed with life, alleys full of stalls, the smell of fresh bread and roasted meat, the laughter of children playing in the mud. Now it was dead as a tomb. Buildings stood empty, their windows broken, doors torn from hinges. On the walls someone had painted strange symbols, crooked lines and circles that hurt the eyes when you looked at them too long. I'd marked them before, knew their meaning. These were songs carved in stone, songs written in a form that could exist without voice. I walked carefully, clutching the glass dagger under my cloak. The rain had finally stopped, but heavy clouds still hung over the city like a shroud. The air was thick, suffocating, smelling of rotten meat and something sweet that reminded me of honey. I reached the square where the Fountain of Three Sisters once stood. Now there was only a ruined basin, filled with something black and writhing. I didn't look too closely. Some things are better left unexplored. The entrance to the crypts was located under the ruined church of St. Vargos, the patron saint of singers and poets. What irony that this was where it all began, and where it was to end. The church doors were open, hanging crookedly on rusty hinges. Inside was darkness so thick it was almost physical. I lit a lantern, old, oil-burning, the last working one in the entire city. Alchemical lamps no longer worked. Magic in Velmor was unstable. The lantern light revealed the interior of the temple. Pews were overturned, frescoes on the walls scratched and destroyed. Someone, or something, had torn out the eyes of all the saints painted in the pictures. In place of eyes were only black holes from which water seeped? Blood? It was hard to say. I approached the altar. It was made of white marble, now covered with brown stains. I knew what I had to do. The old texts I'd read in the archive before its burning were clear. The entrance to the crypts would open only for one who made the proper sacrifice. I pulled out the glass dagger and without hesitation cut my palm. The pain was sharp, clean. Blood, dark red, almost black, dripped onto the marble. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stone trembled. With a dull groan, the altar began to slide aside, revealing stairs leading down. Cold air hit my face, carrying with it the smell of earth, mold, and something else, something sweet and rotten at the same time. The stairs were steep and narrow, the walls covered with slime that glowed with a faint greenish light. I didn't need the lantern. This unearthly glow was enough to see the way. I descended slowly, counting steps. 100, 200, 300. The crypts must have reached deep underground, much deeper than anyone suspected. Finally, I reached the bottom. I found myself in a great chamber whose ceiling disappeared somewhere in the darkness above. The walls were covered with carvings, scenes depicting music? It was hard to call it anything else. Figures with open mouths, surrounded by waves, that could be sound embodied in stone. But it wasn't the carvings that caught my attention. In the center of the chamber stood a choir. No, not people arranged in rows. A choir in the literal sense, a construction of bone and flesh growing from the floor like a grotesque tree. It had a shape resembling a human throat, huge and deformed, and from its interior came a sound. The song. The same song I'd heard for the last few weeks. But here, at the source, it was purer, more beautiful, and much more terrifying. Corvath, a voice sounded behind me. I turned quickly, clutching the dagger. A figure stood there in a black robe, with a hood covering its face. But I didn't need to see the face to know who it was. "Elissar," I said quietly, "I knew you survived." The hood fell, revealing the face of my former friend. Elissar had once been the most beautiful of the singers. Golden hair, blue eyes, a face as if carved from marble. Now his skin was gray as ash, his eyes completely black, and his mouth was full of teeth, far more than a human should have. "Survived?" he laughed, and the sound was like the grating of iron on glass. "No, my old friend, I died. What you see now is something more, something better." "What I see is a monster," I replied, not taking my eyes off him. Elissar smiled wider, revealing even more teeth. A monster? Perhaps. But also an artist, a creator. Do you know how long it took me to compose this song? Years. Decades of searching through forbidden tomes. Conversations with things that lived before the first human spoke the first word. Why? I asked, though I knew the answer. I'd always known. Because the music of the singers was a lie, Elisar hissed. Beautiful melodies for beautiful people, songs about light and hope. But true music, Corvath, true music is born from darkness, from pain, from death. He pointed to the pulsating construction behind me. This is the true choir, not dead human throats, but a living instrument that plays an eternal song, a song of transformation. Soon all of Velmor will sing with us, and then the whole world. You're insane, I said. Insane? Elisar laughed again. Perhaps, but is madness a bad thing when it leads to transcendence? Join me, Corvath. Remember how we once sang together. Our voices can harmonize again in a new, more beautiful form. I looked at his outstretched hand. The fingers were long, too long, with claws instead of nails. No, I said quietly. Elizar's face contorted in a grimace of fury. Then you will die, and you'll still become part of the choir. Every death in Velmor feeds its power. Yours will be no exception. He lunged at me with a speed no human should have. I dodged barely in time, his claws piercing the air where my head had been a second earlier. I struck with the glass dagger, but he was faster. He grabbed my wrist with a force that made bones creak. I screamed in pain, but I didn't let go of the knife. Do you hear it? He hissed right in my face. His breath smelled like rotten meat. The song sings for you. It calls you. Why do you resist? And indeed, I heard it. The melody coming from the choir was getting louder, more insistent. I felt it creeping into my mind, looking for cracks in my consciousness. Sing with us, asterisk, it whispered. Join the eternal song. You will never be alone. You will never suffer. It was tempting. God, how tempting it was. But I also remembered something else. I remembered the last night before the massacre. I remembered how the choir sang in the great hall, and the king and his court listened with bated breath. I remembered the face of a little girl in the first row who cried with happiness listening to our music. Real music. Music that lifted the spirit, didn't destroy it. No! I screamed, and with all my strength struck the dagger into Elisar's arm. The glass blade cut through his body like butter, but instead of blood, something black flowed out, thick as tar. Elisar roared in pain and released me. I stumbled backward, straight into the choir. The touch of that thing was cold and sticky. I felt something wrap around my leg, pulling me into the depths of the pulsating mass. Panic gripped me, but instead of fighting, I did something unexpected. I began to sing. Not the song, not the melody the choir was trying to impose on me. I sang an old lullaby that my mother sang to me when I was a child. A simple, pure melody about stars and peaceful night. The effect was immediate. The choir hesitated. Its song faltered, lost rhythm. The tentacles holding me loosened their grip. Elisar screamed, moving toward me, but I kept singing, louder, more confidently. And then I felt it. Other voices, weak, barely audible, but present. Other souls trapped in the choir, who still remembered what it was like to be human, who longed for the simplicity and beauty of true song. They began to sing with me. The entire construction trembled, cracked, black tentacles withdrew, and I fell to my knees on the stone floor. Elisar stood motionless, his black eyes wide open. What did you do?" he whispered. "I reminded them," I answered, catching my breath. "I reminded them who they were." The choir was falling apart. Its mass was shrinking, blackening, turning to dust. From its interior emerged shapes, ghosts, souls of those who had been consumed by the song. They floated upward toward the light, toward freedom. Elisar fell to his knees. The blackness was disappearing from his eyes, claws shrinking. For a moment he looked human again, like my friend. "Corvath," he whispered, and in his voice was something that might have been regret. "I'm sorry. I thought I would find something beautiful, but I found only darkness." "I know," I said quietly, and then he disappeared, simply dissolved into the air, like smoke. Part 2. The Price of Silence. I emerged from the crypts at dawn. The rain had finally stopped, and the sky was beginning to brighten. The first rays of sun touched the towers of Velmor, making them golden. The city was still ruined, still full of pain and death, but the song had fallen silent. I returned to the Extinguished Candle Tavern. Mirga looked at me, then at the glass dagger I returned to her. It was cracked, useless. "You did it," she said, and it wasn't a question. "Yes," I answered, "but there are things that can't be undone, people who can't be resurrected. The city will need a long time to heal. But it will live, Mirga stated. That's something. I nodded and sat at my usual table. Mirga brought me beer, warm and bitter. "What will you do now?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "I'll sing," I finally said. "Real songs, ones that heal, not hurt. Someone has to remind Velmor what true music sounds like." Mirga smiled. The first smile I'd seen on her face in weeks. "The Crimson Choir may no longer exist," she said, "but singers still live." And so, that evening, in a small tavern on the outskirts of a dying city, I began to sing. An old ballad about a hero who descended into the underworld and returned with light. A few people came to listen. Then a few more, and more still. And though the song couldn't fix everything, though it couldn't resurrect the dead or rebuild ruined houses, it gave people something more precious. It gave them hope. Part 3. Shadows of the Past. 6 weeks had passed since the destruction of the choir. Velmor was slowly beginning to rise from the ruins. People were returning to their homes. The first markets were being held, and the streets echoed again with children's laughter. Not everything had returned to normal. Too much had been lost. Too many scars remained on stone walls and human hearts. But life went on. I sang every evening at the extinguished candle. Over time, others joined me. An old lutist named Gorvine, a young girl Talitha with a voice like a silver bell. Even Mirga sometimes hummed a melody while pouring beer. We were creating something like a new choir, small, simple, but real. One evening, when the moon was new, exactly as it had been when the songs were strongest, a stranger entered the tavern. He was tall, dressed in a gray cloak with a hood that hid most of his face. But I saw his hands, pale, almost white, with long, delicate fingers, a musician's fingers. He sat in the darkest corner and ordered wine. Mirga looked at me questioningly, but I nodded. We served all guests, no matter how suspicious they looked. We sang on, performing a song about King Arathan's ride through the dark forest. It was a cheerful song, full of humor and optimism. People clapped to the rhythm. Some sang along with the refrain. But I couldn't take my eyes off the stranger. He sat motionless, not touching the wine, his hood still hiding his face. And yet I felt his gaze on me, cold, assessing. When we finished, I stood up and approached his table. "You're not drinking," I observed. "I didn't come here to drink," the stranger replied. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but carrying a strange power. I came to hear Corvath, the last singer. My hand automatically moved to my belt, where I now kept an ordinary knife. The glass dagger had cracked, but I'd learned to protect myself differently. "You know me," I stated. It wasn't a question. "I know you," he confirmed. And I knew Elisar. I was his, let's call it, mentor. Blood froze in my veins. "You taught him the song," I whispered. The stranger nodded. "I taught him the basics. He discovered the rest himself. He was an ardent student. Too ardent, as it turned out." "Why are you here?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Around us the tavern pulsed with life, but I felt we were in some kind of bubble, separated from the rest of the world. "Because his work was not completed," the stranger answered simply. "The choir was destroyed, it's true, but the seed was planted. The song still exists, Corvath. It's just waiting for someone to sing it." "Never again," I growled. "I destroyed it, and—" "You destroyed a manifestation," he interrupted. "Not the idea, not the power. Corvath, do you really think Elisar was the first to try to create a choir of darkness? Before him there were others, in other cities, other lands. Some succeeded, some failed, but all left something behind." I sat down heavily across from him. "Who are you?" I asked. The stranger finally removed his hood. It was a woman, young, maybe 25, with snow-white hair and amber-colored eyes. Beautiful in her way, but her beauty was cold, inhuman. "My name is Sireth," she said. "I am a collector of songs. I travel the world gathering melodies that have shaped history, both beautiful ones and dark ones." "So you're just a researcher?" I asked with sarcasm. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I am never just anything. Yes, I research, I document, but I also teach those who show potential." Like Elisar, she admitted. "Though he crossed boundaries I set for him. He became too obsessed with power, forgot about craft." "And you came here to find your next student?" I laughed bitterly. "I'm not interested." Sireth looked at me for a long time, her amber eyes seeming to see something deeper than my skin, than my soul. "I didn't come here to teach you, Corvath," she finally said. "I came to warn you." "About what?" "About what's coming." Sireth leaned closer. "The choir you destroyed was young, immature. True choirs, those that grow in the heart of old magic, are much more powerful. and one of them is awakening." "Where?" I asked, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "In the north, in the mountains of Culmeria, in the ruins of Fortress Kyr-Amoth, where 1,000 years ago the first black choir was created by the mad emperor, where it all began." I knew these stories. Every singer knew them. Kyr-Amoth was a legend, a warning, a cautionary tale. Emperor Vaxius, called the Mad, tried to create a song that could control life and death. They said he succeeded. They also said it destroyed him, along with his entire empire. "Those are just legends," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Legends have foundations in truth," Seraph replied, "and this particular legend is about to become very real. I feel it. The song of Kyr-Amoth is awakening, and if no one stops it, what happened to Velmor will look like child's play compared to what's coming." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "If you're so powerful, stop it yourself." Seraph shook her head. "I cannot. There are rules, boundaries I cannot cross. I can observe, document, sometimes gently guide, but I cannot act directly, not against songs of that power." "So what? I'm supposed to go there? Alone?" "Not alone," she said, pointing to Talitha and Gorvain, who had just started a new song. "You'll take them with you, and others you'll find along the way. You'll need a true choir, Corvath, a choir of light to oppose a choir of darkness." I looked at her for a long time. Part of me wanted to refuse, to tell her I'd had enough of songs, enough of magic, enough of death, that I deserved peace. But another part, the part that still remembered the screams of the dying who were transformed by Elisar's choir, knew I couldn't refuse. "How long do I have?" I asked. "The moon is new now," Seraph answered. "When it's full again, the song will reach its culmination. You have 28 days." She stood up, hiding her face back under the hood. "One more thing, Corvath," she said, stopping at the door. "In Kyr-Amoth you'll find the truth about the singers, about where your power really came from. You may not like what you learn." And she disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a glass of untouched wine. The next morning I called a meeting. Mirga closed the tavern to regular guests, and the three of us gathered. Me, Talitha, and Gorvain. I told them everything. About Cirith, about Kyr-Amoth, about the coming threat. I expected fear, maybe refusal. Instead, I saw determination. "I'm going with you," Talitha said first. She was young, maybe 18, but in her eyes I saw steel will. I lost my entire family to the choir. If I can prevent it from happening again somewhere else—" "Me too," Corvath added, running his fingers over the strings of his lute. "I'm old, I know. Maybe I won't survive the journey. But I'd rather die doing something worthwhile than vegetate here, waiting for death to find me." Mirga looked at us all, her face inscrutable. "You're all crazy fools," she finally said. "All three of you. But those are the best kind of fools." She went to the back room and returned with something heavy wrapped in leather. This was my father's, a night watcher's sword, forged from silver steel, blessed by priests of the old faith. If you're really going to fight a song of darkness, you'll need every weapon you can carry. I took the sword. It was beautiful, light despite its size, perfectly balanced, with a blade that seemed to catch light and store it. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me," Mirga replied. "Just come back, all of you. Velmor needs you. It needs its music." We set out the next day at dawn. 3 of us, with a few sacks of food, 2 tents, and tools that might come in handy on the road. The road to Calmeria led through the heather plains, then through the forest of whispers, and finally through the mountains themselves. The journey was supposed to take 2 weeks, if all went well. That would give us another 2 weeks to find the choir and do what needed to be done. The first days were peaceful. The plains were beautiful at this time of year. Purple heather swayed in the wind, and the sky was clear and blue. Talitha sang as we walked, and Corvath accompanied her on the lute. Simple travel songs that helped make steps seem lighter. But on the 4th day, we reached the forest of whispers, and everything changed. The forest got its name because of the sounds the trees made. Quiet murmurs that sounded almost like human speech. Scientists said it was because of the wind squeezing through specifically formed branches. Locals said it was the ghosts of those who died in the forest, still searching for the way home. We entered cautiously, staying together. The forest was dense, trees growing so close together that sunlight barely squeezed through the canopy. The air was cool and damp, smelling of moss and rotten wood. The whispers began almost immediately. Corvath, Corvath, the last singer. I froze. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Talitha and Corvath shook their heads. "What did you hear?" the girl asked. "My name," I answered. "Someone is saying my name. Corvath, do you remember us? Do you remember how we sang?" The voices were becoming clearer, and I recognized them. Warren, tenor from the 2nd row. Sylvia, who had a voice like a nightingale. Brecht, whose base could shake foundations. All dead, all consumed by Eleazar's choir. "They're ghosts," I whispered. "Ghosts of my friends." Corvath. Gorvain put his hand on my shoulder. "Ghosts can't hurt you. They're just echoes." But he was wrong. From the darkness between the trees, figures emerged. Pale, semi-transparent, but clearly recognizable. 12 singers of the Crimson Choir, dressed in their ceremonial robes. And all were looking at me. "Corvath," Werin spoke, and his voice was like a breeze through leaves. "Why did you leave us? Why didn't you sing with us?" "I was sick," I answered, feeling my throat tighten with emotion. "I couldn't if I had known what Eleazar was planning." "You could have saved us," Sylvia finished. "But instead you ran, and now you're running again, to Kyr-Amoth, where you'll find only more death." "I'm not running," I protested. "I'm going to stop." "You're lying," Brecht interrupted, his bass carrying through the forest. "You're going because you're a coward, because it's easier for you to die fighting an enemy you can see than to live with guilt for those you didn't save." The words hit me like physical blows, because they were right. Through all these weeks, through all the songs and smiles, I'd been carrying guilt inside me, guilt that I survived when others died. "Corvath," Talitha's voice broke through my thoughts. "Don't listen to them. These aren't your friends. They're something else." She was right. The ghosts were beginning to change. Their faces were elongating, eyes blackening, mouths opening too wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "You're right, girl," Werin said, but his voice was now completely different, deeper, older. "We are not the ghosts of singers. We are something much older. We are the echo of the first song, and we know the truth about Corvath." "What truth?" Talitha asked, pulling out her knife. Former Warren smiled widely. That he knew. He knew what Eleazar was planning. He knew weeks before the massacre. But he said nothing, because— "Silence!" I screamed, drawing my sword. But the ghosts only laughed. "Because he actually wanted the choir to fall," former Warren finished. "He was jealous, jealous of others' talents. He knew he would never be as good as Eleazar, as Sylvia, as Brecht, so he'd rather see them all dead." "That's a lie," Talitha shouted. But Gorvain was looking at me strangely. "Corvath," he said quietly, "is it true?" I felt everything inside me collapsing, because the ghosts were right. Not completely, but partially. I knew Elisar was experimenting with forbidden magic. I'd seen the texts he was reading. I'd heard strange melodies coming from his chambers at night, and I did nothing. Not because I wanted them dead, but because I was too proud to admit I needed help. Too confident to believe Elisar would really cross that line. I knew something was wrong, I admitted quietly, but I didn't know what exactly, and I thought I could stop him myself, that I could convince Elisar to give up those experiments. And you failed, the ghosts said in unison. Yes, I said, feeling tears flow down my face. I failed. I failed them all. The ghosts began to approach, their forms becoming more solid, more menacing. And now you'll fail again, they whispered, in Kyr-Amoth, where the truth will destroy you. Thalitha stood in front of me, holding her knife before her. Enough of this, she said. I don't care what Corvath did or didn't do in the past. I care about what he's doing now. And now he's trying to fix his mistakes. What more can a human do? The ghosts stopped. Sing, girl, they said. Sing, if you dare. And Talitha sang. It wasn't a complicated melody, a simple lullaby, the same one I'd sung in the crypts. But in her performance it had power. Gorvain joined her, his lute resonating with a pure note. And I, after a moment's hesitation, joined in. Our voices joined in harmony. Not perfect. Talitha sometimes went off key. Gorvain lost the rhythm. But true, honest. And the ghosts began to dissolve. Remember, Corvath, they whispered before disappearing completely. The truth awaits in Kyr-Amoth, and it will destroy you or save you. And then we were alone, standing in the dark forest, still singing. Part 4. Kyr-Amoth. We reached the mountains 15 days after leaving Velmor. The journey through the Forest of Whispers took us longer than planned. After the encounter with the ghosts, we were more cautious, avoided main routes, camped only in places that seemed safe. Thalitha and Gorvain didn't ask more about what the ghosts had revealed, but I felt the tension between us, the unspoken subject hanging in the air. The mountains of Calmeria were brutal. Steep slopes, sharp rocks, wind so cold it cut through clothes like a knife. But we were determined. The ruins of Kyr-Amoth were located at the top of the highest peak, hidden in fog that never lifted. Locals called this place the Peak of the Dead, and avoided it like the plague. We climbed for 2 days, stopping only for brief moments of sleep. The moon was growing each day. We were at its 10th phase. We had another week before full moon. Finally, at sunset on the 3rd day of climbing, we saw it. Kyr-Amoth wasn't a fortress in the ordinary sense. It was a temple, a complex of structures carved directly into the mountain rock. Columns taller than trees, stairs leading nowhere, arches and domes covered with strange runes. And above it all, at the very heart of the ruins, stood a great tower. Black, tall, twisted like a snail shell. From its top came a sound. The song. "This is it," Talitha whispered. "I feel it." So did I. The song was different from the one in Velmor. Older, more powerful. It was like a foundation on which all other dark melodies were built. "How do we get in?" Gorvain asked, looking at the massive gates blocking the entrance. "We don't get in," I answered. "They'll let us in." And indeed, as soon as we approached the gates, they opened by themselves. With the groan of old hinges, with dust settling through centuries, the gates of Kyr-Amoth welcomed us. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. The song we'd heard from outside had fallen silent. Only the echo of our steps bounced off stone walls. We walked carefully through corridors. Everywhere there were carvings, depicting scenes that filled me with unease. People singing, and from their mouths emerged things, not words, not notes, but beings, small writhing creatures with teeth and claws. "What is this?" Talitha whispered, pointing to one of the carvings depicting a person whose body was turning into pure sound. "The truth about singers," a voice answered behind us. We turned quickly. Cirith stood there, in the same gray robe, with the same inscrutable expression. "I knew you'd be here," I said. "Of course," she replied. "I couldn't let you enter here without a guide. Kyr-Amoth isn't just ruins. It's an archive, a repository of knowledge about the music that shaped the world." "Tell us the truth," I demanded. "The truth about singers." Cirith nodded and pointed to the carvings. "The singers you knew, those from the Crimson Choir, were descendants of an older tradition. A tradition that began here 1,000 years ago. Emperor Vaxius discovered that music isn't just sound. It's power, raw, primal power that existed before the world, before the gods. Music as creation," Gorvain whispered, understanding. "Exactly," Cirith confirmed. "The first word spoken by the first beings created reality, and that power never disappeared. It just became hidden, in human throats, in melodies we sing without understanding their true meaning." "So every singer is a mage?" Talitha asked. Not a mage, Sireth corrected. Something more. Singers can shape reality with their voice, but this power has a price. Each song takes something from the one who sings, part of the soul, part of life. That's why true singers live shorter than ordinary people. That's why they lose memory, health, sometimes sanity. I looked at my hands. How many songs had I sung over the years? How many parts of myself had I given away? Elisar knew this, I said quietly. That's why he created the choir. He wanted power without the price. Yes, Sireth admitted. But he misunderstood the fundamental truth. You can't have power without price. You can only shift the price to someone else. Elisar's choir fed on the souls of those it consumed. But here is something worse. She moved on, and we followed. The corridors turned into stairs, spiraling upward, toward the heart of the Black Tower. Finally, we reached the chamber at the top. It was circular, with a dome of black glass through which you could see the night sky and the growing moon. In the center stood a choir, but not like the one in Velmor. This one was beautiful, a crystal structure, shining and delicate, that looked like an ice palace carved by the gods themselves. And inside it, she was singing, a woman suspended in the air, surrounded by music that became visible. Silver threads wrapped around her body, entered her throat, and emerged as pure, beautiful song. This is Alindra, Sereth said, the last Grand Master of singers. 1,000 years ago, she gave herself voluntarily to become the heart of the choir. She believed she could control the power, that she could use it for good. And what happened? I asked, though I knew the answer. What always happens, Sireth replied. Power corrupted her. Her song, whose words were forgotten, began to speak of dominion. She became what she tried to protect the world from. I approached the crystal choir. Alindra was beautiful, even after 1,000 years. Her face was peaceful, almost happy, but in her eyes was madness. How do we stop her? Talitha asked. We can't, I answered, feeling the truth fall on me. We can only free her. Sireth nodded. To destroy the choir, someone must take her place. Someone must enter inside and sing the song that will dissolve the magic. But that someone won't come out. They'll become the new heart of the choir, at least for a while. How long? I asked. Maybe a year. Maybe decades. Maybe a century. It depends on the strength of will of the one who enters. Silence fell. I'll do it, I said. No! Talitha grabbed my arm. Corvath, You can't. I failed. I interrupted her. I failed the choir in Velmor. I let Elazar kill our friends. It's my fault and my responsibility to fix it. It's not your fault, she cried. You were just human. You did what you could. I didn't do enough, I answered quietly, but now I can. Gorvain put his hand on my shoulder. Are you sure? He asked. Yes, I answered, and indeed I was. For the first time in months, I felt certain of something. Sereth looked at me with her amber eyes. When you enter there, she said, you'll see everything. Past, future, all possible songs that ever were and will be sung. It might destroy you, or change you into something you're not. I understand, I answered. I approached the crystal choir. Up close, I saw it wasn't solid. There was a gap in it, doors hidden in the structure. I placed my hand on the glass and felt it warm under my touch. Corvath, Talitha whispered, tears flowing down her face. Thank you for everything. For teaching, for songs, for— Sing, I interrupted her. When I'm there, sing for me, so I remember who I am. They nodded. I opened the door and entered the choir. Epilogue. The Eternal Song. I cannot describe what I saw there. Words are too small, too limited. I saw everything. Every song that was ever sung. Every melody that ever sounded. From the first cry of birth to the last sigh of death. I saw Elindra, her true self, trapped for 1,000 years in an endless dream. I saw Elisar, his soul still searching for peace. I saw all the singers who came before me and who will come after me. And I sang. I sang the song of liberation, a song that dissolved the magic holding Elendra. I saw her spirit rise, free at last, smiling at me with gratitude. And then I took her place. Crystal threads wrapped around my body, entered my throat, became part of me, and I began to sing. Not a song of darkness, not a song of death, but a song of hope, a simple melody that my mother sang to me years ago. And I heard Talitha and Gorvain singing with me. From below, from outside the choir, their voices reached me, reminded me who I am. I don't know how long I'll be here. Maybe a year, maybe 100 years. But as long as I sing, the choir won't harm. It will sing of a song of light, not darkness. And maybe, just maybe, when the time comes, someone else will take my place. Someone stronger, wiser. Someone who will finally destroy the choir once and for all. But until then, I sing, and in my song is peace. The end.